What is passive voice? How and when might you use it? That's what we're going to talk about today. To understand what passive voice is, it helps to know what active voice is. Active voice is when the subject of the sentence acts. For example, in the sentence, "The mouse stepped on the elephant's toe," the mouse is the subject. The mouse is the one who performs the action, stepping on the elephant's toe. Passive voice switches this up. In passive voice, the subject of the sentence is acted upon. For example, the elephant's toe was stepped on by the mouse. The subject, the elephant's toe, receives the action rather than doing it. Usually, writers and readers prefer active voice in writing. Active voice is more concise and makes sentences feel dynamic and interesting. However, some situations may call for passive voice. Sentences may be written in passive voice when the agent or the one doing the action is obvious, unimportant, or unknown. Passive voice is often used in the sciences where the agent or the person conducting the experiment is considered less important than the experiment itself. Passive voice allows the writer to postpone or avoid mentioning the agent altogether. For example, we could just say the elephant's toe was stepped on and leave the mouse out of the sentence. Because we can leave the agent out altogether, we can easily avoid first-person pronouns like I and me. Rather than saying I stepped on the elephant's toe, the sentence becomes the elephant's toe was stepped on. Who stepped on the toe doesn't matter. Passive voice often creates the appearance of objectivity or unbiased facts. Saying the elephant's toe was stepped on sounds less accusatory than he stepped on the elephant's toe. However, passive voice can also obscure facts. For example, if a news outlet reported a shop on Main Street was robbed, it may be that they are hiding the name of the person who committed the crime, perhaps to protect the thief or create a sense of mystery. So how can you identify passive voice in your own writing or in that of other authors? Passive voice always uses a form of the word be, such as am, is, was, were, are, or been. For example, in this sentence, the elephant's toe was stepped on, the word was is the be word. But be careful, not all sentences with the be word are passive. Another clue for discovering passive voice is to check for a phrase that tells us by whom the action was completed. In the example sentence, the elephant's toe was stepped on by the mouse, the phrase by the mouse tells us who completed the action. These by phrases often come at the end of the sentence. Passive voice sentences may not have a by phrase. If not, you can check for passive voice by adding the phrase by zombies at the end. If the sentence makes sense when you add this phrase, then the sentence is passive. For example, I could say, the elephant's toe was stepped on by zombies. So how can you change a sentence from active voice to passive voice? First, move the object that is acted upon to the beginning of the sentence and make it the subject. The elephant's toe becomes the subject of the passive voice sentence. Next, change the verb to a form of be and the past participle. Stepped becomes was stepped. Finally, move the subject or agent to a by phrase at the end of the sentence. The mouse becomes by the mouse. This is optional. You could also just say the elephant's toe was stepped on. But what if you want to make a passive voice more dynamic and active? First, ask yourself who is the agent. Who is acting in the sentence? The agent may be in the by phrase, as in by the mouse, but it may not even be in the sentence. You may have to infer it from the surrounding sentences. So make the agent the subject of the sentence by moving it to the beginning of the sentence. By the mouse becomes the mouse. You'll also need to change the verb to fit the subject. Was stepped becomes stepped. Finally, Move the object or the thing that was acted upon to the end of the sentence. In this case, the elephant's toe is moved to the end of the sentence. And that's how you use passive voice in your writing.